Have you ever been so angry? That was the caption above this picture, one of these internet memes. So just come with me, all right? The picture, as best I can describe it, sub-Saharan Africa, like a scene at a Black Hawk Down, Mogadishu. There's a car burning in the background and 3 African men in the foreground. And the guy closest to the photographer has just thrown something. It's off the picture now, but he's in the motion, turning and seeing at the last second the picture being snapped. And you can tell he's stunned. But very rapidly, your eyes move from this guy who's closest in to the guy in the middle of the picture who is clearly the focus of the photographer. And this man is maybe 6'3", wiry, athletic, but he is fully upright, fully extended with his arms over his head, and it looks like a small log. I mean, imagine 4 big baseball bats banded together. He's got over his head, and he is ready to bring it down with full force on somebody or something, and it is going to be bad. And as I sit there looking at this picture, I begin to realize that's not a log, that's a... And if I needed confirmation, there it is. And at the top says, have you ever been so angry that you picked up a cactus and started swinging it? Now, that was my response. I laughed out loud. I thought it was hilarious. And then I began to soak on it. And I sat there and I thought, wait, how angry would you have to be? I mean, I've bumped into a cactus before, and any notions of grabbing it and picking it up are immediately disabused. And what are we talking about? How angry would you have to be just to grab the nearest thing without regard to pain and start swinging it at somebody? And then it came to me. Reading through the accounts of people interacting with Jesus, how often that's what happens. I think I read right past it for years. People who are talking with Jesus, and all of a sudden, they're reaching for the nearest thing to kill him. Stones. How angry would they have to be? And I read those same passages. I don't get that upset. But these are people who are interacting with him face to face. Am I really under the delusion that I understand him so much better than they do? What are they seeing and hearing that I'm missing? John 8 is where we're going. We're jumping in on a passage where Jesus is full-on debate with some religious leaders. And it's very easy to kind of jump in and begin to read this as some bad grammar school playground argument. My dad's better than your dad. My dad can beat up your dad. That kind of thing. But all of a sudden, it's cactus time. What's going on here? Hear God's word beginning John 8, verse 37. Jesus speaking. I know that you are offspring of Abraham, yet you seek to kill me, because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have heard from your father. Now pause for a moment there. You're reading this, you see uppercase, lowercase, they wouldn't have had that. They're hearing him biologically, factually. Verse 39, they answered him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you'd be doing the works Abraham did. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. This is not what Abraham did. You are doing the works your father did. They said to him, we were not born of sexual immorality. We have one Father, even God. Now pause again. This is a not so subtle hint at the suspicious questions around Jesus' birth. This is 3 decades later, it's still following him. Verse 42, Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me. For I came from God and I'm here. I came not of my own accord, but he sent me. Why do you not understand what I say? It's because you cannot bear to hear my word. You are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. Which one of you convicts me of sin? If I tell the truth, why do you not believe me? Whoever is of God hears the words of God. The reason you do not hear them is that you are not of God. This is a devastating assertion from Jesus. They say, verse 48, the Jews answered him, are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? All right, pause again. They're talking about his mama. They're calling Jesus a half-breed. This is a racist statement, but it's also talking about his mom. And they're saying he's demon-possessed. He's out of his mind. This is one last-ditch effort to laugh Jesus off, but he's not going to let him. He's going to press. Verse 49, Jesus answered, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. The Jews said to him, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets. Yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he'll never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died? Who do you make yourself out to be? That's the question. The right question. Jesus answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? And Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Cactus time. So they picked up stones to throw at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. This is God's word. Let's pray. Lord, this is a hard passage with some things that are overtly problematic for our culture. Things that would make it difficult for us to hear. Come by your Spirit, open our hearts and minds to hear you. My words are inadequate, Lord. Come and let your people hear what you've said. May the words of my mouth and meditations of our hearts be pleasing and acceptable in your sight. We ask in your name. Amen. All right. Housekeeping. Greetings from the South Bay. Your daughter church, PCC South Bay, it was a year ago this Sunday. 11/11 at 11. It was November 11th at 11 a.m. Last year we had a meeting just outside Barnum for interest in our daughter church in the South Bay. Thank you for your support. Praise God, he's at work in the South Bay doing things through us, through other churches preaching the gospel. We are so thankful to be a part of that. Keep praying for us. But I wanted to say thank you before we dive into this hard left turn passage, all right? So here we go. Child of the devil, child of Abraham. What? All right, what does this have to do with me? Let's go here together, okay? I know for some of you, even to talk about this, especially if you're here, you're considering Christianity, is it intellectually viable? What do I do with this kind of stuff? This is exactly the reason I don't buy into this stuff. Hold on a minute. Jonathan Haidt, spelled H-A-I-D-T, a sociologist. Some of you may have read his stuff. 2 years ago, 2017, he put out an article called The Age of Outrage. Well worth your time to go look up. Take you 20 minutes to read. And in it, one of the things he says is our society is, quote, drowning in outrage stories, end quote. That may not be that surprising to you, but he goes on to illuminate this, talking about how we are doing that, how we tend to vilify the other, how the volume is all the way up on 11 all the time, which leaves no room for nuance, no room for dynamics. How do you deal with this? Accordingly, there's a guy named Michael Godwin who's an attorney, and a few years ago, he kind of put forth this maxim, which those of you who interact with people on social media or online, you may have seen this. It's called Godwin's Law. And the way it goes is he said, the longer you're in a conversation online, the longer you're in a debate, or especially social media, the longer you're in a conversation online, the greater the probability that Hitler comes up. Come on now. That the Nazis are involved. What is he saying? It doesn't matter the conversation. You're in an argument with somebody, you begin to reduce the other person. You vilify them, you villainize them. They're nothing but you're evil. You know, the Nazis are indelibly marked in the modern psyche as the personification of evil. And I'm going to make you that. So I win, you know. This is how we're operating. And so here you come and you hear Jesus and he's like, okay, oh, child of the devil. And you think, oh, Godwin's Law. Is that what's happening? Is he just up on 11? Jesus is just making a rhetorical point. There is an exception to Godwin's Law. And it's this. What happens when the only appropriate analogy is Hitler, is the Nazis. Just a few weeks ago, a Muslim refugee in Sweden is telling her story that she escaped from this province in China where she was at a re-education camp. Maybe some of you read this article. It's making the rounds. If what she is saying is true, she describes being forcibly taken to be a teacher at this camp. And she is told what the communist government wants her to re-educate people, and round the clock, all these people who have, especially Muslims or people from other faiths, people, anything that is contrary to the communist agenda, these people are brought to the re-education camp and they're forcibly taught round the clock, sleep deprived. And if you do anything wrong, if a Muslim chooses to try and observe the 5 times of prayer, instant punishment. And that punishment, by what she describes, is nothing less than torture. In some cases, rape. In some cases, inhumane experiments are being performed on people. And after a time of being in this camp, she said, basically everybody who comes in dies there. No one goes home. But since she was a teacher, at some point she gets released, and she's a few months out, and then she's told, you have 3 days, and then you're going back. And you're not going back as a teacher. You're going back as an inmate in this camp. And she knows that's a death sentence. And she chooses to take that chance to escape, and she flees and is able to get out. And now she's telling her story. And even the English author who is relaying this, he says the only appropriate analogy he could think of is concentration camps. Is that Godwin's law? Or is that accurately describing the situation? Now, immediately, some of you in the room are already, danger, danger. This is exactly why religious people kill each other. You start saying, child of the devil, you've got to go. Hold on. About whom? To whom is Jesus speaking in this passage when he calls them child of the devil? Secular people, irreligious people, people of other faiths? No. He's talking to the Jewish leadership, the pastors. One side note, John is not anti-Semitic. There have been people, these kinds of passages read out of context, people get, oh, he's against Jews. Remember, Jesus is a Jew. All his early disciples are Jews. You go and read John carefully. Jews are treated with complexity. This is the group of leadership, the pastors, to whom Jesus turns and says this and fires. What is he saying? That they, under the auspices of faith and doing the things of God, would actually be instruments of the devil? What are we saying? Well, I know for some of you, even to consider evil, that whole notion, you're like, look, I'll consider Christianity, I'll consider the things Jesus teaches as an ethical teacher, but all that stuff, it's got to go. Let's push that, let's deconstruct that kind of stuff. Hold on. Andrew Delbanco is a professor at Columbia University. A few years ago, he wrote a book called The Death of Satan. And the subtitle of it was How America Lost Its Sense of Evil. And the premise, as Delbanco unpacks this, is that in our Western enlightened society, we want empirical data, we want scientific evidence, we're going to talk through sociology, all these other means. I want science to explain to me the human condition, what this is, and push out terminology like evil and sin. We've got to get that out of society. And Delbanco begins to argue in this book that actually, far from helping us better intellectually navigate reality, it's a denial of reality, of evil. And now that we get rid of that vocabulary, we no longer it's inexplicable. We lack the capacity to deal with it. Let me read this quote to you. He says, "A gulf has opened up in our culture between the visibility of evil and the intellectual resources available for coping with it. We have an inescapable problem. We feel something that our culture no longer gives us the vocabulary to express." Now hear what he's saying. He's saying that the reality of evil is still present. And if you deny it, you're actually ill-equipped to deal with reality. Now, if you think that's anti-intellectual, here's an Ivy League professor bringing that, and it's seen as an influential work, and saying, what are we doing here? What is this actually about? And if you're here and you think, I want to consider Jesus as a teacher, but I want to push those kinds of things out, especially if you're a self-described forward-thinking Christian, and you just want to deal with the ethics of Jesus, as you read the earliest, most well-attested accounts of Christ, the Gospels, it is evident Jesus believes evil is real, and not only real, but personal. Now, if you're a follower of Christ, what do you do with that? That's not what is he saying here? What is he describing, especially as he points that canon at religiosity, people ostensibly within his own faith? Satan. We know this term we know from the Old Testament, the book of Job. Ha-Satan is the Hebrew. It literally means the adversary. Jesus in verse 44, he begins to fill in the content of this. He calls him the father of lies, which is probably a head nod to author of evil, but certainly means at least deceiver, self-deceived, deluding others. And now what is he saying? That these guys who are leaders of the faith would be self-deceived and denial? This isn't just a shot at, the secular people, they don't know. Charles Baudelaire made this famous with a short story that he has about a man walking through Paris. And as he walks through Paris, he encounters, Rolling Stones, a man of wealth and taste. It's Satan. And he walks with him, he has a conversation with him, goes back to his lair in Paris, and it's opulent, den of iniquity, hedonism, left and right, those kinds of things. As he's talking with him, he says to Satan, have you ever been scared? Ever been fearful? He says, one time, a preacher got in the pulpit, and he said, quote, the devil's greatest trick was convincing the world he doesn't exist, end quote. And some of you know that from Usual Suspects. Yes, I'm a fan too, all right? But the same premise of that movie is what Baudelaire is getting at. That you would think, with your intellectual capacity, you have a better understanding than the rest of the room. Especially those fanciful people who believe in the metaphysical things. And what the Bible is conveying is a central thesis. No, evil is real, personal, more intelligent than you are. How do we deal with this? If that's a reality, how do we cope with this? Jesus is saying that they are children of the devil? Now, if it's not Godwin's law, that is as offensive as you're feeling it, but what exactly is he saying? What does it mean to be a child, to have the DNA of Satan? Who are we talking about here? This deceiver, this adversary, the father of lies. Well, I know in my own DNA, some of you know, my parents divorced when I was 1, and I grew up, seeing my dad every other weekend, but I was with my mom all the time. And my mom, I would be incessantly compared to her. Oh, you've got your mom's eyes, you've got your mom's mouth, you've got your mom's nose. Please don't think my mom is ugly, all right? But I was compared to my mom all the time. I was a teenager. My dad had remarried, and I'm at my stepmom's salon. I'm in the chair. She's cutting my hair back when that was a thing, She's cutting my hair, and one of my dad's friends walks in who never met me. And he looks at me, turns his head, he goes, oh, you've got to be Harry's boy. I had never heard anyone say that to me. I never thought that. I remember leaving there. It's the only thing in my head. I'm thinking, what? And I begin to notice my jawline is just like my dad's. And then, 16, 17, 18, I'm full grown. I'm the exact same height as my dad. Oh, we've got the exact same skeletal structure. I ran cross country in high school. I'm running with a friend, somebody who knows my dad well. This person looks over and says, you run exactly like your dad. I was like, what? I didn't go running with my dad. Your DNA will out. It'll show up. Now, some of you know, you're down the road already. That's a scary thought. Hold on for a second. It is an election year, as we said before, which means the banter is going to be nuts. But if you find yourself thinking, it's the worst it's ever been, there's a short video on YouTube, you can go look it up. It's called Attack Ads Circa 1800. It's the first major post-George Washington election. It's between Jefferson and Adams. And their rhetoric, get ready. It's everything you'd expect today. And they shoot back and forth. It's just being read back and forth by the author. And it'll remind you of some things. But one of the worst things that Adams says about Jefferson is he's a philanderer, a serial philanderer, and he's even slept with one of his slaves. And that rumor stuck with him, for the rest of his life until he died. And then for 200 years, historians kind of dismissed that as political propaganda, mudslinging, that kind of stuff. And then we got the ability to do DNA testing. Sally Hemings was the slave in question. And now it's known that an entire strand of her family bears Jefferson's DNA. Your DNA will out. What is the DNA of Satan's family? Jesus is saying to them, he's a murderer from the beginning. You want me dead. You're plotting to kill me. He's the father of lies. He won't listen to truth. He doesn't have ears to hear. What is he saying to them? Do you understand who this is? Genesis 3, Satan comes to Adam and Eve. What is the hallmark of his operation? He says, oh, you can't trust God. Who should you trust? Yourself. He's not out for your best. He's not out for the most good in your life. Trust yourself. The theme of Satan is self-reliance. In Isaiah 14, it's this passage about the king of Babylon. It's called the morning star. Verses 13 and 14, commentators call Satan's prayer, where he says, I will ascend the throne. I will climb the holy hill. I will conquer. I will be as the Most High. That is the heart of Satan. That is Satan's motto is, in my own strength, I will conquer. Now buckle up, America. Is this not? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I am what I do. I am what I accomplish. In my own strength, I will conquer. I'm a pastor. My eyes open in the bed, and immediately my day is what I do with it. This is what Jesus is talking about, the DNA of Satan. We are self-deluded. But where's the cactus thing come from? Well, Jesus said just before this passage in John 8:34, he says, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. That we give ourselves over to this slavery of thinking we can be self-reliant, and it destroys us. It's self-rending. But how is that hateful? I mean, I don't have that kind of passion against God. I'm not angry at God that way, most of us. Becky Pippert is an author who said, I'll quote her this way. She said, anger is not the opposite of love. Hatred is. And the final form of hatred is indifference. I get what she's saying. Something comes between you and what you love, the object of your affection, and you are passionately against that thing. You hate it, but if you have your way, you want that thing removed between you and what you love. You want that thing excised from your life, and then you couldn't care any less. It's gone. You're indifferent towards it. That's what she's saying, that you just want that thing to not exist at all. You're not passionately against it. The final form of hatred is you don't care. Every middle school girl knows this intrinsically. I was talking about this with my wife, my sisters. I mean, let's just own this. Girls are ahead of boys, especially socially. Boys, the cacophony. My son is at this age, and the hormones hit. And but you get in it with other boys, and it's just, you get sideways with a friend, and you punch them, and then we're done, And girls are so much more advanced, I don't need to pick up the cactus when I have a psychological one, that's the sense of it. You're moving along, and here we're buddies, we're all in the circle of friends, and there's Jane, and Jane's in the circle. Everybody loves Jane, and then one day somebody doesn't love Jane. Jane's got to go. And so Jane is now, everybody else needs to know, Jane's on the outside. We're going to ignore Jane. No more talking about Jane. Jane's gone. Now, nothing happens to Jane. Nobody does anything to Jane. But when Jane comes in, nobody's talking to me anymore. Nobody's having anything to do with me anymore. And there's Jane on the side. You walk past, I see that locker, but there's no Jane. And it's kind of funny as an adult, but there's nothing more gut-wrenching for a middle school girl. Because it's utterly dehumanizing. What do you call it when you do that to God? What? And it's not that God has the insecurities of a middle school girl. This is factually the final form of, you hate me. And nowhere is that more evident than the cross. The cross is God's clear mirror for us, that given the opportunity, we want God dead. We want him out of the way. He's in between me and what I want. And Jesus is saying that's living, not only is that living out of accord with reality, but it's the final form of hatred. It's indifference. You are in denial with how you were designed and made, and that brokenness is killing you. And the cross is a reflection of that. So here it is, Ephesians 2, that all of us by nature are objects of wrath. Is Jesus saying we're all children of Satan? Apart from him? Even the pastors? Even the pastors. Uh-oh. So what's the juxtaposition? What are we talking about? Child of Abraham. Remember Abraham, this Old Testament figure? Who is this? What did he do? Here's Abraham, and he's, is it that he did something wonderful? We got to be like Abraham, do what he did? No. Romans 4, which we read earlier, Hebrews 11 talks about his faith. And in particular, that he believed God came and made promises. Remember, Abraham's 99 years old, and he's not going to have a kid. And for some of you in the room, that's a very personal thought, but for others of you, it means nothing. So what? Well, I don't have to have a kid. I've got my career. I've got other things. We're an individualistic society. Our reputation, our individual things matter more to us. They were corporate. Not being able to have a kid was your identity, was longevity, was who you were. Your existence would fall apart. It was the main thing. And God comes to Abraham and says, I promise you I'm going to take care of you. Now, this is the same scenario for Adam and Eve. Do you believe God's promises? Is he really out for your best? And what Abraham had to do in that moment was, is he going to trust the promises of God more than he trusts himself? And Ephesians 2 tells us even that was a gift from God. It's like the man who came to Jesus and said, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. Some of you are living in the crisis, and you know in that moment, trying to trust God more than you trust yourself is virtually impossible. That you're coming unglued over when he starts messing with your thing. I mean, for some of you, you don't care about kids. Any things I've talked about this morning doesn't matter to you. But there is something in your life that if God starts to mess with that, you go nuclear. The world is melting. Cactus time. What do we do with that? This is what Jesus is talking about. That is actually a sign of our death and our slavery. And to be a child of Abraham is not be like Abraham, because the whole point is Abraham was a failure. You go to read, he failed left and right. It was that he trusted God's promises more than he trusted himself. And what is that promise? What Jesus is saying. The reason these guys lose it is he says, he calls them a child of the devil. They don't pick up rocks. It's when he says, before Abraham was, I am. Which is Exodus 3:14. It's the very name of God. These are religious leaders. You've messed with my thing. They go nuclear. They recognize Jesus is making this megalomaniacal claim. And what is he saying about who he is and what he does? This is why he's marching straight toward the cross. Because not only does the cross show us what's broken about us, but it shows us a love of God that's bigger than our brokenness. That Satan's motto, Satan's prayer, Satan's thought is, in my own strength I will conquer. And Jesus goes to the cross and he says, in my weakness I will lose. What's the DNA of Christ's family? In my weakness, at my expense, you will gain. Satan, I will conquer. You will lose. At your expense, I gain. And Christ gives away. How do I move from child of the devil to being adopted into that family? The cross is Christ doing what we never could. Me recognizing I'm that broken, I'm that messed, I need someone to transform me. Every day I wake up and I still battle with it. I even need him to transform that in an ongoing capacity. Is there a love that good that would push and imprint in all those messed up places in my life? James Boyce was a pastor in the last century in Philadelphia, and you dentists out there have to correct me after this, but in the last century, amalgam was it was the going technique. It was cutting edge. And Ward C. Miller was a dentist in Philadelphia who he perfected the technique. And people came from all over the country to study under Miller, under Ward C. Miller, the amalgam king, they called him. And so the amalgam king, he would train his techniques. His students would come and watch him work with amalgam and do fillings, all the things in people's mouths. And after a few years, they'd go start their own practice somewhere. And one of those students moved out here to the West Coast, started a practice, and it was taking off. And years go by. A soldier comes back from being deployed overseas. He comes in, sits down in the chair, and this former student of Miller comes over. The guy opens his mouth. He looks in the soldier's mouth, and he goes, "Are you from Philly?" The guy says, "How do you know that? You know, I don't have the accent anymore. I've been all over the world. How do you know that?" He says, "Because I looked in your mouth. I mean, I can see here the imprint of the work of the amalgam king." And Boyce would look at his congregation and say, "Do you understand what it means? That Christ is inside you, pressing into the broken places of your life. His imprint, taking on your biological and broken spiritual DNA and pressing his in." Let me be personal with you. Some of you know I went to Princeton Seminary, and far from an accolade, as a school for pastors, there's a lot of screwed up stuff there that in my arrogance, part of why I went there was, oh, now I get to flash this title. But if you go to school to learn to be a pastor because I got academic credentials, do you understand that is self-reliant? That's the DNA of Satan at pastor school. And a lot of us were there to say, look at my credentials. Child of the devil. Others were there, this academic institution, to look for God because at least somebody here with some knowledge can tell me if anything's legitimate about this. And then other people were there because they were angry at God and wanted to have it out. My buddy Joel was in that last category. And I remember we met up first year, and we're going to all these classes together. And he was hilarious, very intelligent, very quick-witted. And Joel, you're all day, every day talking about the big promises of God. And he was so cynical, so jaded, always sharp to just mock, mercilessly undercut all the big promises. I hated those kinds of cheesy, we're going to sing this song and everybody believes this. He would mock it mercilessly. As we got to know each other, our personal histories came out. I was talking about my family history. He began to talk about his, and I found out when Joel was 6 years old, his dad got a gun and shot and killed his mom. And one day, he lost his mom to murder and his father to prison for the rest of his life. He was adopted by his maternal grandparents. And he said what held the family together was not familial interaction. It was a mutual resentment for what his dad had done, if not outright hatred for his father. So fast forward 2 decades, now we're at pastor school together. And that jaded cynicism is coming out in everything. All these, where was God when? And as some of you know who've been deeply wounded, that's what makes for really good art. The brokenness of any good artist is you were looking, I don't have the vocabulary, like Del Banco said, I don't have the vocabulary to articulate exactly what's happened here. And you look for poetry through sculpture, through music, and his outlet was music. He was a songwriter. We wound up having this little seminary band we put together, and we were playing these kinds of songs, but a lot of them had this kind of element in it. And the song by far that I liked the most was one he had called Old Man. But in the chorus of it, it said, maybe finally, I'll never know the subtlety. Maybe I'll end up like my old man. And he was admitting that fear that cannot escape being like my dad. Before we left seminary, he had a longtime girlfriend, and they had a falling out. And one night he gets drunk and inebriated. He goes to her apartment and is beating on the door because he's so desperate to have her back. And it's the middle of the night. She's fearful. She calls the police. And he gets put in jail. And first time in my life I had to go bail a friend out of jail. Seminary. Side note, your pastors need Jesus as much as you do. I am a child of the devil apart from Christ. Back on point. So here's Joel. I bail him out of jail. We're driving home. He's silent. Doesn't want to talk. It would be years later before I realized how incredibly difficult that moment had to be, that he was incarcerated, ostensibly because he was moving toward the woman he loved to do violence. Will I end up like my old man? He graduates seminary that year. We were roommates together in the summer. He disappears. He just leaves. All of his stuff still in the house, just leaves. And I knew he was hurting, but I tried to call him. The rent's running up. I'm calling him. He's not answering. Eventually, we just took all of his stuff and put it in storage. And I'm still calling him. He won't answer. No one's hearing from him. He's just disappeared. And after a year, I'm like, I can't keep paying for his stuff. And we finally just sold all of his things. Years go by. One day now, I'm married. I'm living in Tennessee. And Amanda and I hear from Joel. He's getting married. And he and his new wife, they come by, they want to stop and talk to us. And I'm like, something's changed. What's going on? And he tells me, of all things, he's now a worship leader. You don't understand how ironic. This is the guy that I was convinced at seminary was least likely to ever want anything to do with God. And now he's a worship leader. I'm like, how do we get here from there, And he starts telling me about this guy who started pursuing him and investing in him. He's a pastor locally and caring for him and pouring into him. And God was using him to press into the broken places of his life. Joel would wind up having 3 boys and wrestling with these kinds of things with his dad. And one day his mentor's preaching and says, preaching on the 10 Commandments. Commandment number 5, Honor your father and mother. Uh-oh. Commandment number 6, thou shalt not kill. He turns to his wife and says, I've got to go see my dad. They get in the car and drive to the state penitentiary, not that much longer, later than that. And of course, it's been decades. What are you going to say to your dad, to your mom's? And so he's thought it through. He said, the way this will be least awkward is if they bring him in, I shake his hand, we have chairs set up, I sit down very quickly. It's the least awkward possible, maybe conversation will develop. So he's playing this out. He and his wife come in, they set up their chairs and one chair across for him, and the guards bring his dad in shackles. He shuffles in. And Joel goes over to shake his dad's hand. And the man breaks down weeping. And Joel said he found himself embracing him. And the only thing he was thinking is, God, have mercy on this broken man. What? Do you understand? That is not his biological DNA speaking. How do you get there from here? The only way that Joel could love like that, could move that way, is if he knew he himself was that broken. He needed God's grace in that same way. That the cross means I equally need Christ to do for me what I could never do for myself, that he's poured into my broken places, that now instead of my dad, his heart would be rent for him, to move toward him the way Christ moved toward him. Now, let me be clear with you. Everything hasn't been bed of roses since then with his dad. There's decades of resentment to work through. But have you ever experienced anything like that? I want you to understand, nobody else is offering that. Nobody loves like this. Whether you're a secular person, you think, I got to be good, you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Other religions that say, here are the rules, eightfold path, here are the 5 pillars, here. You don't follow, even thinking mistakenly about the 10 Commandments. In my own strength I will conquer is death. If you are here and you're not a Christian, this is the thing I want you to hear and know. There's no other love like this that moves toward someone as messed up as me and loves me even as I would want him gone. Christian friends, do you understand what this means the church is? The church is not a place where we build a moat and all the good people come inside and we keep out all the bad stuff. We are the bad people. We are the bad people. And the hope for this world is that God is changing people like us. And the joy that erupts in you when you start realizing that is uncontainable. That you move out toward other broken people because you know you're broken. And that there's something bigger than you that's offered. And it begins to spill out. And lives change. Deep broken places in your own life begin to have hope that you secretly weren't sure God would ever bring any hope into. Do you know what it means to be adopted into the family by the only true Son of God? At his expense, at his loss, we gain. By his weakness, he makes us strong in him. Let's pray. Lord, now as we come to this table, which is a place for messed up people like me, we rejoice. We come knowing this is a time of reflection, that you want us to draw near to you and own the places where you are doing work, admit our need for you, and be drawn to you. Lord, I pray for people in this room who do not know you, who are not sure if any of this is real, who are very wary of it, that you, by your love, would transform them, like you transformed me, like you transformed Joel. Be at work in us, Lord. Be changing us. Lord, let the church not be a place of arrogance and self-righteousness, but a place where we have no self-reliance, but we run to you in our weakness, and we're in awe of how you poured into us your love. Lord, change us by your grace, in your name. Amen.